All right, the off season continues on the Real Kipper at Noon show. That doesn't mean that we're going to stop bringing you high quality content in the world of hockey, and we are doing that again today. So we talked a little bit about my book. Obviously, we're talking about Undrafted. It's been out for the last little while. Please feel free to pick up a copy at any of your bookstores, Indigo, Chapters, Amazon. You can find it. A big portion of this book revolves around my days with the New York Rangers and the 1994 Stanley Cup run. That means that we found Mark Messier, so look for that. And also my next guest is a guy that played a big part of that team. He isn't lost for words, folks, even after all these years. And just to give you a little bit of an example, just prior to rolling on this interview, our sound check guy, Jordan, asked Mike Richter for a few words for a sound check, and it lasted 7 minutes. That's the longest sound check we've ever had on the Real Kipper at Noon show. Ladies and gentlemen, the legend, Mike Richter.
Thank you, Kipper. Great to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
So basically, I just told everybody you love to talk. And, I wonder about all those round tables we used to have in the hotel lobby, myself, Eddie Olchuk, Glenn Healy. How did you not end up being a commentator the way that you like to talk?
I think the key is I like to mostly listen to myself. No one else does. So I talk only to hear myself. And really, I don't make a ton of sense. So no one else really has any interest in hearing what I have to say. No, you think about that team we had, Kip?
Oh, yeah.
We had so many people like yourself that had such large personalities, Glennie Healy, right down the line, Eddie Olchuk, that ended up having the locker room was a place you didn't want to miss. Adam Graves always said that he liked getting there early just so he wouldn't miss any of the jokes, and there's always something going on. This is my cat Todd, and I'm going to move him because you're going to end up seeing too much of that. So. Great.
That's a screen. Is that your first screen in almost 20 years?
Yeah, and the last 14 screens before that were all Jeff Boogaboom.
So you couldn't get him out of your way.
Question for you. No, he's up in Ontario. I'm down in Connecticut, and he's still in my way. That's how big his ass is. Kipper, I got a question for you though.
Yeah, buddy.
I see that your show is called Real Kipper. Are we led to believe that there is a fake Kipper out there?
Yeah, good question. And it really stems from this whole social media thing about 12 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. And I was never on Twitter. And all of a sudden, there's a lot of fake Nick Kypreoses or Kippers, and they were reporting all these trades. And I think one had you, going to Winnipeg or, the WHA. That's how ridiculous it got. And I had to put out a Real Kipper Twitter handle to get rid of all the fake ones. And there you go. I had a few imposters. Can you believe that? Someone would want to impersonate me.
That's a new low. No, I listen, often imitated, never going to be replaced, Kipper. There's only one of you.
Yes. So you didn't get into broadcasting, and we're going to go back a little bit and have some fun. But currently, it's hard to believe, Mike, but you retired in the early 2000s, and you're almost closing in on 20 years. And I know you've been in the energy sector, and you've been helping do some wonderful things. Your present company, is it Brightcore still?
Yeah, Breakcore Energy, exactly. And
yeah, tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I mean, like you, Kipper, my love is hockey. We all started out as fans when we were kids. We were lucky enough to play this unreal sport and the great people that are at every level of it. I mean, that is, as much as cliche, you remember it just, it's so many fun times. And it's why I like having my kids play. They get to experience a little bit of that, but we all have interests outside of that. And if we could play until we were 80 years old, we would. We can't. So you go on with life in a different manner. And, I coach on a youth level here and there, sometimes seriously, sometimes not. getting into a broadcast would be great because you get to stay around the game that you love. So, the problem is you just can't do everything that you want to do. And I got into the energy space shortly after I retired. It was something I had interested in even when I was playing. Um, and look, you kind of have to apprentice yourself to anything. You get into broadcasting. I mean, obviously you're a great personality, but you still have to learn the intricacies of any profession. And just because you're a good hockey player doesn't mean you're going to be good at anything else. You have to learn. And I had to learn a bit about this energy world. And you, again, had to follow that path of broadcasting. And so, now it's been a good 15 years or so, and I start to feel like I have a bit of a clue about what I'm doing, and I feel pretty comfortable here. But I'm mid 50s. You're never done learning, and hopefully we'll continue to find things that interest me. The hard part is as you know, is finding something that gets you as focused and as excited as the sport that we played and loved does. And in some ways, I do find that God, it would be hard to be on a pro level a coach or a day to day in the broadcasting, just because it would almost hurt. You're not out there, and
Yeah.
but I'm still a fan. I mean, I listen to your show. I watch every hockey game you can. It kills me that we're in this pandemic for a variety of reasons, obviously, but sad to see the sports being put to the side the way it has to be at the moment. So it's a long answer, as most of mine are, but the thing about it is it's a little bit conflicted because yeah, I'd love to stay around the game. I still see guys, Leetch here in New York. Mess does a lot of volunteer work and whatnot. The game gave us so much. Wayne Gretzky said that so well. Everything he has in his life is from the game he loved, and so I guess you could say you're giving back in a lot of ways, and there's different ways of doing it, but. Yeah, I'm happy with the Bright Core business I'm in. We do retrofits to make buildings more efficient, like everything
Yeah.
from
Listen,
lighting to solar and all that. It's
and
great.
I know Ricky, there's a lot of hockey fans out there. There's a lot of Ranger fans. We're going to get into so much the Pavel Bure breakaway, the Stanley Cup run. We'll get into Lundqvist and
Hmm.
what your thoughts are on and him. But I'm fascinated still with you in the energy sector. So be patient with me while we get to those great
Sure.
stories for all of you. But I'm just wondering now in 2020, and you've probably been at it for, 10, 15 years. What is the biggest challenge right now when it comes to what you do and still putting us and the world in a position of education here? What's the
Yeah.
biggest challenge right now to convince people that we need change, for many reasons, including things that we can do to save the planet?
Yeah. Interesting, Kipper. I think the answer is right in your question. Um, Kipper, whether it's a vaccine, a pandemic, so much in our country has been politicized. So I think it's just a matter of getting people educated. Forget the word environmental or ecology or green, and let's just talk about better, right? Elon Musk makes a really good car. It's not a perfect car, but it's a step in the right direction for something new and improved. That's what we're trying to do. We're putting in better technology than what's there. And so, whether it's a heating system or anything else, it means that you and your house have more comfort. You're paying less money, and of course, you're hopefully have less waste, which means less pollution. So, I think in the green world, everybody's talking about whether there's carbon footprint and all that kind of technical stuff. Replace the word with better. We want better technology. We want cars that move better, cleaner, quieter, faster, more efficient, cheaper to run, cheaper to operate, cheaper to buy. And we want cats that listen to you. We're working on that. But truly, when you look at this, it's does clean energy work as well as fossil fuel? There's a place for everything right now, and whatever it is, you have to continue to evolve. I was on a question and answer this morning with the Rangers, and a fan had asked, what do players get bigger, stronger, all this kind of stuff? And you just think, a player of today's game, you take the worst player in the league right now, number 732 or whatever the number is, the worst guy in the league, he's a phenomenal player. The game has evolved. Okay, you don't have any clunkers out there. You have nobody who can't skate. Everybody can shoot.
Yeah.
Is there a bad goalie out there? I mean, every team seems to have three great ones. games evolve, they get bigger, stronger, faster. Players have better nutrition, better training, and all that. And that's what we're doing with our energy system. So this is not radical. This is it's called progress. And so I just sometimes get frustrated because there's a lot of misinformation. Oh, solar panels don't work. I had a guy tell me the other day, I don't believe in solar panels. I'm like, you don't believe in the concept? Like, you don't think they're there? Is this thing I'm holding not real? If you want to talk
Yeah.
about are they as efficient as advertised or how much do they cost, there's conversation to be had, but everything's about better than what we're replacing it with. And if it's not, it shouldn't be in the conversation.
Well, I got a lot of confidence in you, pal, because I've seen you talk to people and relate with them. And if anybody can get that message out, it's you. I want to go back to my book a little bit because I do start it from the very beginning, Ricky, in terms of how I first fell in love with the game and
Mm-hmm.
watching it with my dad on a black and white TV. And here's this
Mm.
immigrant father that only knew ice in his drinks, nothing else. And I never looked back. I want to go back to your scenario a little bit, and even the goaltending position, because everybody seems to be scared of being a goalie for maybe obvious reasons to a parent that it's a tough position. It's the last line of defense. People tend to point fingers. How did you get involved with the goalie pads? Because either that or you're the fattest guy on the team, or in
Yeah,
your
the
case,
guy,
maybe the biggest ass.
the guy who couldn't skate. It's interesting. My older brother Joe is 3 years older than I am. He's a good athlete, and he played goalie, and we all played hockey. I grew up in Philly when the Flyers were winning, so we emulated everything that happened. Bobby Clark, Bernie Perron, Reggie Leetch, Dave Schultz. I mean, that was the Broad Street Bullies. It was a cool team to watch. Easy team to hate from a distance, but if you lived there, you loved them. And as a goalie, he had Bernie Perron. He was French Canadian. He was cool. He had that accent. He would go off and fish in the summertime, come back and win a cup. It was a really cool thing. So I played a lot of street hockey with my brothers. Philadelphia didn't freeze over much, and that was a way of playing either street or ice with my older brothers and friends in the neighborhood because you could play goal, and they're like, they always need a goalie. My brother played in the men's league. He's my oldest brother is 8 years older than I did. So I was 12 years old, he was 20, and they needed somebody for a beer league. And I could take a nap, get up, play hockey, come back home, and play against big guys. So it kind of naturally went there. But truth be told, I probably just copied my older brother Joe. He's like, you copy everything I do, you'll be a goalie. I'm like, believe me, I'm too smart for that. I'm a forward. I scored one goal and had one assist my first year and was offside maybe 1,000 times. It was a wise move moving into the net. Reading the play was not my forte. But as a goalie, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. It was not in any manner a burden. I loved it. My personality was such that you want that responsibility and all this kind of stuff. But funny enough, man, as a parent, my my oldest, I should say, wanted to be a goalie at one point, and he was pretty damn good. And I was like, God, tons of equipment. All the other parents are looking at you like, hey, your kid's an idiot. All right, what do you want me to do? He lost one from the blue line, like he was a good player, but I got to tell you, my wife and I were both like, no, you stay forward. So I understand where the parents are coming from, but honestly, playing the game, I love the equipment. Because I'd sit there in the summertime putting on equipment and checking out, saves in the mirror. And there was nothing about that sport I didn't like from practice on up. And so I just found it to be the most enjoyable damn thing. You're on a team, but you've got your own little position on that team that's in and into itself. It is. There's no sport that I've played that's that much fun.
I got a chance to catch up to Mark Messier, of course, and we talked about growing up in minor hockey, and you wish you were that great player like a Connor McDavid or a Sydney, where you're just the best every year, and that's never a question. To my surprise, Mark struggled. He had a few years where he struggled, albeit playing older players, but just not strong enough. At times he had a choppy stride, and I'm like, really? Can you ever imagine Mark Messier with a choppy skating stride? How were you, Mike, in terms of playing net growing up? Did it ever get to the point where you're like, oh my God, I got to get out of this position?
No, but I had a lot of coaches tell me that. No. Mostly on the Rangers. No, I loved it. I was always kind of young for my team, and just wasn't many goalies, so there was always a place to play. And I was good as a kid. I was a decent athlete. But yeah, I think what we tend to do from a distance. I heard those stories too. Uh, his mom said he didn't win everything as a kid, and he struggled as an 18-year-old in the WHA or the NHL, like that, understandably so. But there's so much maturing that has to be done. This is, um, however big, strong, and good you are. Rangers just got the first overall pick, and Lafreniere is going to be a better player in 10 years. God forbid there's any injuries, because between the ears, he'll get that experience and he'll be battle tested and hardened, and he'll know himself more. And I was shocked to hear, because Mark walks into the room, as you and I have experienced, this born leader and knows everything and has experienced it all. And the reality is, he had to make himself, like we all do. I mean, he had to learn how to win and learn how to lose and learn how to adjust. Wayne Gretzky did too. And if you listen to those guys closely, these winnings on an individual level, even for a Mark Messier, and as an organization, it's a learned deal. You have to get the right habits. You have to internalize them. You have to make them your own. And a lot of it's through hard fought, emotional and physical struggles. And yeah, Mark did do that, and it made it all the more impressive in some ways, because he just rolled out of bed, knew everything. Well, there is no struggle there, and he made himself into that leader that we experienced, and that great player that we all got to watch. 6 Stanley Cups and all the great, personal awards and team success that he had. And I think every player, even Connor McDavid, needs to go through that. There's an adjustment period. It doesn't come easy to anybody at that level. So I think that's, a necessary, a real, and a valuable part of playing the sport at every damn level, whether you're in college, whether you're in juniors, whether you quit after your sophomore year of high school. You experience that struggle game in, game out, practice in, practice out. And I think it's a damn valuable thing. So, and I think overlooked too, because it's always easy to look at that other guy and go, wow, it came easy to him. We had pro careers, and they're like, well, I didn't have your talent. And maybe they did, but you worked harder, So, there's a lot of fortune, there's a lot of luck, but there's always hard work, and there's always overcoming adversity to get anything done right.
When we think about now, great U.S. hockey players in history, there was a second generation. We know the first generation really stemmed out of Lake Placid with the Miracle on Ice. You got a chance to experience the Olympics in 1988, and that's when I started hearing about the next generation. And I heard your name, and I heard Brian Leetch's name, and Tony Granato, and Eric Weinrich, if I'm not mistaken, Craig Janney, and it wasn't as successful as Lake Placid in Calgary for you, but what did you get out of it, and what kind of pressure did you feel just being 8 years removed off that amazing Miracle on Ice?
It's interesting. That's a good question, because in some ways, I think I was 12 years old and we were watching the Miracle on Ice, and I think it was tape delay. I mean, it was, back then there was, you listened to it on the radio. It was interesting because the '84 team, I think, had a lot of pressure. Eddie Olchuk was on that team. Remember the diaper line with Patty LaFontaine, and
Yes.
for a little while, Tom Barrasso was on it. They were extraordinarily talented. Jensen, they had some Chelios, very good players that went on to have probably more success in the pros than most of the 1980 players did. But they didn't have success on the ice in Sarajevo, where they were. And there was a huge buildup. There was an expectation, oh, well, U.S., But international hockey on any given year, obviously Canada is tops. But what are the Russians? What are the Finns? What are the Swedes? What are the U.S.? These are great teams that come into every tournament expecting to have a shot to win the championship. And they should, because they're that good. So, as much as they said, oh, the 1984 team fell on their face. I think it was Goslin, the goalie for Canada, played, an unbelievable game and beat the U.S. like 4-3 or something like
Yeah.
that. I can't recall, but they weren't terrible. They just didn't win against great teams. And we were very similar in Lake Placid. I don't think we had, sorry, in Calgary, I don't think we had the pressure that 84 team did on the heels of Lake Placid. But we had a couple first round picks, Craig Janey, Brian Leetch.
Yeah.
We had players that went on to have very good careers. Chris Terreri, Eric Weinrich. These are
Kevin
Scott Young,
Stevens too.
Kevin Stevens, great guys, great players.
Yeah.
The single thing that we didn't have was experience. Really, we were a very young team, and I think, scored 5 goals on the Russians, which is a great claim to fame. But they scored 7 on us. That didn't work out so well. But we weren't mature, and if that team could have stayed together and give them a couple years, a couple Olympics, they would be, I think, a devastatingly strong team. Great skating, strong, great group of guys, great character, but just probably too young to be playing against Czechs and Russians and expected to really dominate them because of, you think of that was Fedosov's, I think that might have been his last Olympics. I'm not so sure, but that was like the true Soviet team. That was the machine. Right. And, they were every bit as talented, but they were battle tested in a way that we just weren't. And so we can surprise them for a couple periods, but maybe not a full game. And that's really where it was. We played very well in Calgary, tied Germans, beat, Austrian, the teams we should, but we probably lost the teams we should have. And that may have been 2. That was Hasek with the Czechs and the Russians. And, in a short tournament like that, you lose 2 in the first round, you're out. And so there were expectations, but I think, like the players from the 84 team, the 88 team, and a lot of players went on to do great things in the pros. And each year after that seemed like there was just more and more of a I guess, a pool of talent to choose good players from. And, by the time you get up to now with, then there's the Madanos and then the Patrick Kanes, there's not too many secrets out there. Everybody seems to be producing great players. Look what Germany's put up this year, in the draft. So unlike when we were young, especially with the internet, everybody's got the same training and kind of understanding. So it's harder and harder to distinguish yourself as, I think, a player, and even as a country developing good players.
Nick Kypreos, Mike Richter, the U.S. great goaltender from my generation, joining us today. Mike, when you came out of the Olympics, especially going to another big platform like New York City, unlike maybe a top prospect going to a lesser market like St. Louis, did you and Brian kind of feel it a little bit in those early years just based on the notoriety that maybe the Olympics gave you?
It was helpful. I think one of the things that really helped was, for the U.S., the trajectory then was to play locally and get maybe into juniors or some good high school and then get to college. And then from there, make the Olympic team. But funny, the Olympic team came and I'm like, okay, here we go. I'm an Olympian. And we get done the Olympics and Rangers want to sign you. But they had John Van Beeswick and Bob Froese, 2, veterans, great players. Beezer had won, a couple years prior to that, the Vezina. I'm not going to walk in there and take these guys' spots unless I earn it. And that's the way it should be. And I went straight to the minors and played 20, 30 games with them. In the IHL, it was the Denver Rangers at the time, prior to the Avalanche being there. And we were the only show in town and played in this old kind of cool old barn, the Civic Center there. But it was an afterthought, and it was perfect in the sense that it was a hard life. You're on a bus, you've gone through juniors, you're busing everywhere, you're playing in front of no crowds. You're no longer on the Olympic team. You're not the home team every time you step on the ice. It's about performance and just that. You're playing 5 games and 9 nights in 4 different cities. It's important stuff. You got to learn to apprentice yourself through that and be able to, college was amazing and I had good coaches and everything else, but you're practicing 5 days, playing 2 games on a weekend. Then you go into the Olympic team where it's a great schedule in terms of the hockey, but it's an easy life in a sense. Man, you get to the minors and reality strikes. You're either going to perform or you're out of a job. And I think that was really important. It helped me hone my game a lot. And I came back to camp the next year, felt great, had a great camp, went back again to the minors, and then was able to play in the playoffs that year. Leetchy went straight in, as he should have, and was great. I can remember him scoring his first goal against Grant Fjord, just like, wow, he's in the show doing that. But that's the whole thing. You have to be able to obviously have the talent, but you have to be able to be consistent enough to be able to be relied upon, particularly in the position of goaltending. Like, you can't be great one day and not the next. Your team needs you every night. And nowadays, there's no such thing, this myth that the regular season doesn't matter. Oh yeah, go ahead, drop 3 games in October, you may not make the playoffs. So, it's 3 games in a row, I should say, right? I mean, you don't want to get behind the 8 ball. You have to have consistency. And I think that was what I needed in my game. And the minors provided that. And, it makes you feel worthy of being in New York. And going into a place like that, after being on the Olympic team, was pretty cool. I mean, those people are pretty knowledgeable, and they have expectations, and it makes the job a hell of a lot more fun when there are people in there demanding.
Hey, by then, when you first pulled into New York, did you have a pretty good read on Brian Leetch? I mean, did you figure him out pretty quickly? Because I remember coming to New York, and at times he's quiet, at times he's got a strong opinion, but he's a funny fuck too, Ricky. I
He's
tell
a
you
funny
what,
man.
he's
It's
hilarious.
He's crazy, and just because he's quiet, that's the thing that maybe I had to figure out early. Doesn't mean he's not thinking. There's a lot going on behind those droopy eyes. He's just kind of looking at you like, Kipper, get done talking so I can skewer you. He even as a player, I remember the first time on one of those junior national teams, everybody kept saying, this kid's good. He could be drafted really high and all this kind of stuff. He was 16 or 17 years old. He was 150 pounds of fat. He, looked like nothing. And I couldn't save him on the breakaway. I'm like, God, he's like, you have some big, strong guys at that level. And it's the first time you're seeing dudes that can really move the puck. And then Brian comes down, and he's kind of like this wet noodle, but he's smart, and he's thinking about where you're leaning, and he's reacting to you, and he's anticipating, he's thinking on the ice in a way that most of the kids at that age didn't. Most of the adults don't. And I can remember, give you an example of what we're both talking about here. We would drive up to practice plenty of times, the 3 of us, and I remember taking Leetchy up one day, and I drive into the back of Rye where we practiced, and just gives you that look like he's burning a hole through you. I'm like, what? He's like, what are you thinking? I go, I think I just put my car in park, and I'm going to go in and get a bagel and then get ready for work. And he's like, it's Thursday. I'm like, yep. And yesterday was Wednesday. He's like, no, man, this is when the water truck delivers stuff to the back of this place. You get called here every time on Thursday because the water truck can't get in. It stops you there. There's a fence around it. We're going to be stuck after practice. I want to get home. I'm like, my God, the guy's anticipating his parking spot on a Thursday because there's a water delivery once a freaking month. So, I mean, but that's how he saw the game, right? I mean, he was always like that. And so
That's hilarious.
He may be quiet, but he's always thinking. So, yeah, he is an amazing player and actually a really sharp thinker too.
Oh
really
my gosh. He is intense. And
very
we
intense.
saw it totally come to the surface in '94 when he won the Conn Smythe, first American to do that. But similar recollection is driving up to Rye Playland for our practice, and I don't know, maybe we lost 2 games, maybe we're on a 3-game losing streak. I'm not sure, but here I am, still happy, and I'm sitting in the front seat right beside him, and I decide maybe I'll change the radio station. And there were those laser eyes. What are you doing? I don't know, changing the radio station? No, you're not. I was done after that. I was like, I taped my arms to my side. I didn't touch
co-pilot.
I didn't touch the radio. I didn't touch, I didn't even roll my window down. I said, can I do my seatbelt up?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, what's interesting though? I mean, he's an example that competitiveness and intensity come in many different forms, right? Someone once said, like, you see somebody lose a game and break their stick and all that kind of stuff, and wow, he's a real competitor. It's like, no, he just lost his mind and broke his stick. It doesn't mean he's more competitive than that guy who happens to be quiet. And character and intensity and competitiveness, your personality has nothing to do with it necessarily. It's kind of what's between your ears. Like Brian was always so calm on the ice. There were literally times he didn't say a word for 45 minutes in that car trip up, but he was the guy yapping on the ice a lot. Hey, Ricky, watch behind you in your back door. You got Yager, or watch the wraparound. They like to pop this thing in front. Like he would talk like we're having a conversation. He's not yelling, just this monotone. Ricky, watch the short side there. We got a guy coming behind the net. I'm like, Brian, could you get excited? Because you're putting me to sleep. But he was very, he was always going, and he was the guy, as quiet as he was, as mellow as he seemed. You lose a game and he'd be up all night thinking about it. He had as much, kind of intensity as the next guy.
The best I remember. And you're right. There's just never a time when you just saw him super excited or just not in control.
Yeah.
And it's mayhem after we won the Stanley Cup and everybody's jumping around, acting like crazy. And I found Leetchy beside me, and it's like, Leetchy goes, what do we do now? No, I said that. I said, okay, what do we do now? He says, I don't know. I've never been in this position before. Let's go ask Mess.
Yeah. Mess had an idea or two.
That was it.
Yeah,
that was it. Let's like, we're out of ideas now.
He once broke his wrist when we were in Tampa. And it was just, that old arena that they used to have was hot as hell. And we were running around in our zone. And it was a penalty kill. And he had gone down to block a shot, but it kind of went sideways. And he put his stick on the ice so the pass wouldn't get through. Someone took a blast and hit him in the wrist. And I hear him go, oh, loud. And we're still, it bounces off, goes back. And there's, I can't seem to stick a fork in it. So it keeps bouncing off of me. And it seemed like we were there about a full period, being run around in our zone. He goes, Ricky, if you get a chance, get a whistle. And I'm like, okay, Brian, well, what do you think I've been doing for the last 5 minutes while I'm about to have a hemorrhage? But he's like, I'm hurt. I can't, put two hands on my stick. We finally, the puck goes out of the ice. And he goes to the bench and he comes back the next shift. We're still shorthanded. And I go, Leetchy, all right? He was like, nah, it's my wrist. And same thing, monotone. I go, well, it's okay, right? He's like, yeah, it's broken. I look at him like he's, like, how do you know? He goes, because I went to the bench and throw up. I always throw up when I break bones. He went out and kept playing the shift. I was like, okay, then. But, not, all monotone, nothing to see here.
In speaking with Mark, we talked a little bit about Keenan and the way he challenged Brian. I told Mark, if it wasn't for you, maybe Brian doesn't finish the season. Maybe he's even traded.
Yeah.
And then I recalled an episode where Mark went into Keenan's office in Florida and said flat out, don't worry about Brian, leave him alone. And that was the end of it. But I'm just wondering, like, maybe he had the perfect demeanor to even handle, although he drove everybody nuts at times, Keenan, maybe Brian's demeanor really came in, that level-headed demeanor came in best because he was able to not only just overcome the challenges from Keenan, but actually thrive. What do you remember about it?
Well, I think one of the things that became pretty clear with Mike was, and I loved playing under him. I mean, we won the cup. We had a great team, but we had a veteran team that could handle it. And one of the things that Keenan did, he pushed you in a lot of ways, which were really valuable. But he also wanted to know who you were and what you're made out of. So he would challenge you, and he'd embarrass you, and he'd try to see if you had any emotions at all. And what he wanted was to punch you and see if you punch back. And anybody who didn't, boom, there's the door. If he rips you new in the locker room and you fold tent and start weeping, you're gone. And one of the things that I thought was funny about Brian was he's like, it was early in the year and he's going, everybody's telling me how good you are. Tell me, you're the next Bobby Orr. Chris Chelios, I'd trade you in a heartbeat if I could. And, really tough stuff, that you don't really want to hear from your coach after a loss. And he's like, what do I have to do to get you going? And Brian said, just, again, monotone. You don't have to tell me anything. I'm going to play. You don't have to yell. You don't have to insult me. I'm going to play either way, whether you yell or not. So whatever you say doesn't matter. And it was a bit of it was a real pushback to Keenan, but it was 100% honest. He's like, Brian's in his own little
Yeah.
bubble. He's got his own standards. If you call him the best thing since sliced bread, he doesn't give a crap. If you say he's horrible and we want to trade him, he doesn't care. He knows what he's about. And I thought that was some people will challenge Keenan and say, I'm going to break my stick over your head. Others would weep. And Brian just said, you don't have to do anything. I got my own standards, basically, and, back off. And I thought Keenan didn't quite know how to do that because he couldn't seem to get to Brian. He's very, he doesn't get too flustered. And I think that was, it drove Keenan nuts too. So it was probably wise on Mark to say back off because Brian certainly has enough jam to get himself ready to play every game.
And of course, I got to talk to you. All the fans out there want to know about nothing more exciting than a penalty shot, and that's in the regular season. How about a Stanley Cup final when it's the Russian Rocket? Yeah. Much like I asked Mark Messier about his guaranteed prediction, that penalty shot for you, did you shit yourself just a little bit?
Had to do a little cleanup afterwards. Yep. No, there was. It was an interesting thing because JD had asked. Burry did the same move on that penalty shot in the Stanley Cup Finals as he did in the All-Star game earlier that year in '94 at MSG, and he's like, you must have been thinking about that. And JD really, kind of put it together well. I didn't. I mean, partially I just forgot.
Yeah.
But the other thing was, think back about Pav. I mean, that year, Pavel Burry was scoring goals in buckets.
A goal a game. It was phenomenal.
Yeah. Fastest guy in the world, and he was dominating. But, like all good players, they don't have just one move. They don't have one, they have a bag of tricks. And I relate to the story that Luke Robitaille once said. He's like, we were getting ready to play a game. He had been traded from Pittsburgh. And we're playing against Pittsburgh at the Garden 2 weeks later. He's like, hey, Ricky, if Mario comes down on a breakaway, he likes to show high glove and go backhand. Seen that move? I'm like, thanks, Lukey. We had played Mario 300 times, so we'd seen probably everything. And it's kind of quiet in the locker room. And he's like, but I seen him go high glove. He really likes peanut butter. He goes top shelf all the time. I'm like, all right, Lukey. But if you're going to poke check him, you better do it early because I seen him go around guys. Poke check's not a good move on him. Thanks, Lukey. And he likes between the legs. And, he goes through basically, it was going on for about 5 minutes and it was funny as hell.
You got a million things in your mind right now.
Yeah. Get out of the net. He's going to score is basically the answer. And Pav was a little bit like that. He had scored in that very series on a shot between my legs. He had scored in the series before a backhand deke. And of course, he had tried and scored, I think, to win that series in the 7th game overtime against Calgary on that forehand deke. So my point was the guy wasn't going to do just one thing. If I try to guess, he's going to go the other way and make me look silly. So I tried to play him honest. And really there was, he's got speed. He's going to come with speed, but the man can shoot too. So if you're too far back and you don't want him going around you, he'll roof it on you. I'm not a big guy, so I had to come out and then maintain.
And it's just not coming out. You came out of the net like you had gotten shot out of a cannon. And when you did that, I think I was beside Eddie Olchuk at the time, and I said, watch him skate backwards now. And it's almost as if you matched his speed. Here he is, the fastest hockey player in the world. And the one thing that I've known from practicing with you every day was what a phenomenal backwards skater you are. And that's the only way you were able to reach out is because you were able to get back. So you matched his speed, which is a very hard thing to say when you're going up against the fastest player in the world at the time, but you did it.
Yeah. And the one thing that's good about that whole situation was it was a penalty shot. Well, two things, actually. It was a penalty shot. And as dramatic as that is, it gives me time to set up. Because what Pav often would do when he scored on a breakaway was he would be scooting around, have a little bit of speed, and take 2 steps and be gone. He would blow through the defenseman, catch a pass, great hands, But the Russian rocket, the guy could get himself open. Lemieux used to do the same thing. So he was on top of you before you could even recognize the play was coming.
Yeah.
And now I'm not in any position. On a penalty shot, put the puck at center ice. Terry Gregson comes down and says, Mike, you know the drill. You can't go out until he touches the puck. I'm going to blow the whistle, this, that, and the other thing. Actually, I've never seen that happen, though, where if I came out of the crease before he touched the puck, did they blow the whistle? Or I don't know. But there's time to set up for it in my own eyes. He won't take me by surprise. I know what's coming. That's a single kind of benefit that I have from a penalty shot as opposed to a normal breakaway. The other thing, and I look back on it, the guy had played so many minutes per game. He was their, undeniably their star. And he got pulled down at the end of a shift. He was tired. You could see him talking to the ref, and I think he was just trying to buy time because he was exhausted. And that was, I don't know, what was that, game 4 or something like that? I mean, that had been a long playoff series. It was probably his 19th playoff game or something like that. And he'd been relied on, and it had been a full season, and it had been physical. Every single team that comes up against Pavel Bure, what do? They hit him. So I think he was probably a little bit tired at the end of that shift. And of course, it was a penalty shot, not an actual breakaway. So he wasn't going to take me by surprise. That was to my advantage.
Well, that moment and many throughout your career, 14 in all, Mike, and I know it probably didn't come to an end like you would have hoped. You suffered a severe head injury. You were concussed, and it shortened your career. I don't know how many years you would have liked to have played. Would you have been the type of guy to take it as far as you could? But you did suffer a concussion, and if I'm not mistaken, was it a fractured skull, which makes it even that much harder to deal with? Because, I mean, I suffered a concussion, many have, but never to the point where I think we suffered anything like that.
Yeah, it was weird. In some ways, it's easier because a doctor, at some point says, "Look, I'm not gonna clear you to play." So this monumental decision is made for you. You don't have to think, "Oh, what do I do now?" I could have, and thought about it briefly. Taken out insurance and overridden the doctor's order and gone out and played. But I'm 36 years old with 2 kids and and another on the way, and probably not a great idea to risk another injury. I mean, at the time, the amount of time that elapses between head injuries matters. And I feel pretty darn good right now. Had I gone out and gotten hit, a month later, maybe not. The fractured skull was a freak thing. It was Chris Tamer, who used to play with the Rangers, and he just got a hold of one that was bouncing and it had a little bit of a knuckleball thing. Short goalie, I went up and kind of turned sideways, and it went through my ear hole and hit me above the ear. Crazy as hell. Anyway, it was a fractured skull, and I had to take some time off. I came back and played and ended up getting hit again. And I think it was the proximity of those 2 hits that Doc said, look, we got to Christmas, and I was hit in November, right around this time, first week of November. And she said, look, I'm going to ask you not to play this year because it's not getting better quick enough. And by the time the end of the season came around, I still wasn't feeling well. That scared the crap out of me. So, yeah, I mean, it's one thing to be in denial, but you couldn't be in denial when you felt that bad, as you know. So the decision wasn't a shock to me, but it was hard for me to admit to myself. I actually took a day. It was in Montreal where the doctor was, and I went down to Lake Placid and spent a day by myself. I couldn't even barely bring the phone call. I couldn't even tell my wife I was done. I just couldn't say the words. And it is super emotional because, heading in there, you're hoping for good news. Walking out, your career's over. And that's a lot to process at once. And so in some ways it's easier. In other ways, you don't get to leave on your own terms. That's for damn sure. So that was hard. How many more years would I have had? I don't know, but I was still playing good hockey and would have played until they cut the skates off me. At some point, someone's going to tell you, we're not giving you a contract. You're done, old man. But I had a couple more years. So, as much as that's a disappointment, you know how it is. You look back in your career and go, what you got nothing but gratitude. What an opportunity. What a gift,
I do remember it being very emotional for sure at that time.
Hard to describe
in your life. The other thing I remembered was something that Glenn Sather said at the end of your retirement. to the point where I actually went to go look it up a little bit. Do you remember what he said in his post?
Nick Kypreos will buy you lunch for the rest of your life.
No, no. He said, Mike Richter has always been a good guy. You never had to worry about Mike getting in trouble with the cops or drinking too much or beating his wife. That's
Hey,
that's Glenn Sather talking about you.
I got to tell you, he must have
I'm
worked on that
sitting,
speech a
I'm
while.
going, wow, what a tremendous tribute to Mike Richter.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I must have really set a high bar. I have not been caught beating my wife, therefore.
So you know what? I think he might have been okay with the cops and the drinking too much, but what I remember is I worried about you getting beat up by Veronica.
Yes, actually, I'm blinking right now. This is a call for help. I've been stuck in this house quarantine, and she's kicking my ass.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, that
Oh.
was so funny. I remember at the time, the place kind of went quiet. I just went, really? That's what I'm left with?
Oh
Moments to be
gosh. And
proud of.
I got to give you full credit too, because Mike, for all of us, and I don't care even if you're retiring with 30 or 50 million dollars in the bank, there is that transition.
Yeah.
No more crowds, no more people cheering for you, asking for autographs. You went back to school, man. You grabbed a knapsack, and you became one of the oldest students in Yale history, or at least the oldest looking one with a knapsack.
Yeah. And every time I got one wrong, I'd be like, hey, man, I had a brain injury. Give me some credit.
No, no, no. Do you remember my save against Pavel? And they're like,
Yeah,
who?
that doesn't help the history test, buddy. It was good. And in some ways, it was crazy. In other ways, it's scary leaving the sport. You're leaving this life that you're familiar with, that you're good at. It's comfortable on a number of levels, but the biggest thing I think is just emotionally, you're comforted by this is what I do, this is what I'm good at, and suddenly you're 36-year-old infant. You're like, holy crap, what skills do I have? What am I doing? I knew where I was going to be 4 months from now because I look at the schedule. Oh, we're playing Anaheim. I know what I'm going to have for lunch. I know when I'm going to sleep, and suddenly just poof, it's gone. And what are you doing? And it's hard. I had a young family, so that took up a lot of my time and energy and focus, and that's a good thing. Because as you know, you're kind of selfish as an athlete. Your time and your focus and your energy goes into the next practice game and everything. So in that regard, the timing was pretty good. But going back to school bought me some time because frankly, you're lost, man. It's an emotional thing, and it takes time to process. And I from the time I announced it, I had about a half a year, and then went into school and took a few classes, and then went full time. And it was an adjustment, but it's an adjustment going back to the real world, and it's got to be made for everybody, and it's a hard thing. So I think school bought me a little bit of runway there.
Yeah, and to Slatz's point, it kept you out of trouble with the cops, and you're not drinking too much, like
Not
obviously
that
you did
much,
before
yeah.
Slats got there.
Wait till 10:30 in the morning, usually.
Hey, there's so much more we could get into, but I know I don't want to take up too much of your time, but this has been awesome, Ricky,
Awesome
and
to see
I'm
you,
so happy for your success outside of your great historic run with the New York Rangers. Can I ask you a little bit about Henrik Lundqvist,
Oh
because
yeah.
you finished at the top of almost every category in Ranger history, and then you watched Lundqvist knock a lot of your records off.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that he didn't beat yet is bringing a Stanley Cup. But, you got a chance to retire a Ranger. I know a lot of Ranger fans are disappointed he couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, look, I know Hank well, but you don't know what goes on. And I think he approached it pretty well toward the end of his career, saying, all right, they have two young guys, making less money than me. There's a disruption in the play with this pandemic. We don't know whether we're even going to come back. And if we do, there's a little bit of a youth movement going on here. and he had some cool options. Go back and start, or finish where he began in Gothenburg, back in his home in Sweden. Go play in another team. That to me, and he said this, it had to be the exact right kind of situation. They have to be a good team, good enough to be competing for the cup, but very few places are competing for a cup that don't have a good goalie. So you're not needed in some ways. And the opening happened there. And so, I think Holtby's been phenomenal for Washington, and just I've been so impressed with him as a goalie. And Henrik's been phenomenal here. And so sometimes maybe going to a new place revitalizes the team you're going to. And Todd wants to say hi, and he's going down. And it may revitalize him. And so I hope that, the season gets off, because it'll be odd, like it was to see Marty in a different jersey. But Lundqvist has had such a good career. And I think what is just, Gretz said it, and Gretz, with all his records, said, records are made to be broken. So, you'd love to be the guy that has the most wins in the history of the game, but there's better players come along, and people that string it together in a way that Lundqvist did, that deserve the accolades he gets. One thing I really appreciate about him is his work ethic. He was a real professional. He went out there, and if he played a bad game, he was going to go back to the drawing board and figure it out. And, with Benoit Allaire, the just tremendous goalie coach in New York, they were such a good combination of having that fire to be better, to hold yourself to a high standard, and not be satisfied with 30 wins this year. Get 50, get whatever you need to get, go win a championship. And obviously he was disappointed not to win one here, but he still may. And the one thing is, you never want to leave anything on the table. You'd hate to retire and then 5 years later go, man, I probably still have 3 years left in me. I could have really contributed. And nobody asks you to come back once you're gone. Like, nobody. It's that talent, that opportunity. Once the door closes, it is over. So it'll be weird. And I think a lot of people don't like him in another jersey, but I think you have a responsibility when you have that talent and that opportunity to make the most of it while you still can. And he is.
Well, he wants what you have, and that's a Stanley Cup. And there's no
I thought
question.
You meant Todd, the cat.
Todd. If he would have been able to close out a Stanley Cup for the Rangers, we never see him in a Washington Capital uniform.
I don't think so. No. I think you right off into the sunset. And the one thing you don't want to look back on the career is, it's less the wins and losses. It is that. I mean, there's still goals that I wish I could have back, games, seasons, whatever. But the regrets come from not applying yourself, I think. You want to make the most of the talent you have. And you were a hardworking guy, Kipper. Nothing came for free. And, you won't want to be sitting in the position you're in right now going, wow, what if I had tried a little harder? Maybe I could have made that team. You did. And that's important at any level, at anything you do. So you can't get that time back. And it's hard to tell a young player that, because they think they'll be there forever, and at some point it is over. The longest career is a short career anyway,
Have you got a fish in your pocket? Is that why, Todd, the cat's all over you right now?
I haven't fed him in a week. I'm walking around with tender vittles.
Wasn't there a story that reminds me? Wasn't there a practice story about a fish in your BMW?
Oh, that's a good one. No, this was a real story. John Van Beesbrook, and I think this is, he was a veteran. I think it was my first or second year maybe. And we had an older team, really good group of guys. But we were coming back flying commercial from Las Vegas, not Las Vegas, but LA. And, you play the game the night before. It was a late night. Everybody gets up the next day, and you take that early morning flight back to the East Coast. And guys were playing practical jokes on one another, and someone took a pair of shoes. I'm trying to think who it was. Was it Gresh? Anyway, one of the vets had their shoes taken while they were asleep. They pulled them off their feet. They went to sleep at 7 a.m. They woke up when they arrived, and Chris Nyland, that's who it was, Chris Nyland. And Knuckles Nyland and Beezer to do with it. He just sat there. We were dispersed all over the plane as you are, we're not all sitting together. And as the lady went by with her cart, I think it was Gresh, put his shoes on the lady's cart. They're gone. He gets up. He's got bare feet. Just came from LA. He's walking through the airport in like February in bare feet. People are looking at him. Nyland's like, "Hey, just got back from LA." He kind of played it up. Everything was a joke. But he goes, "I'll find a guy, and when I do, he'll pay." Turns out that, it was Beezer who didn't intervene. Beezer didn't do it. He just didn't intervene. So Nyland says, "I'll show you." And he was hurt. So everybody was out in the ice, and Nux was getting therapy. So Beezer, everybody, the team's out there. He gets a full bluefish, as I recall, from a local fish market, goes to the back seat of Johnny's car, gets his keys because Johnny's on the ice, pulls the seat open, puts the damn bluefish back there, puts the back seat back on top of the bluefish.
Oh, no.
Locks the car, and 2 days later, Johnny goes home. He's like, "What the hell's going on here?" Gets up the next day. It is horrific. Leaves the windows open, comes back, takes it to the car dealership. The guy's like, "Dude, I don't know. Did your dog throw up in it?" No. Takes it, gets it detailed. The guy said, "I detailed the car." John's like, "It's worse." Goes back. The guy is taking it apart. He's like, "Oh, a mouse must have fallen asleep or died in your, air conditioning system." Takes it all apart. Long story short, he takes it apart the third time. There's a dead fish there with maggots and everything else. So, yeah, note to self, don't screw with Nux.
Oh my God. That's like a Seinfeld episode.
This was, yeah.
That was awesome.
There's Knuckle Island. He had some great stories, man. Holy
Great
crap.
stories. Hey, thanks so much for your time, Mike. Congratulations on an amazing career. Thank you for being a good friend. Thank you for sharing a great moment in my life. I was able to put everything in the book, undrafted. You played a big part of it, Mike. Really appreciate your time, pal.
Kipper, you're a great friend. We love the stories. I still laugh every time I think of the time we had together. So I'm glad that you're out there sharing your experience and mine and others with your audience. There's only one real Kipper, so I really appreciate you having me on, and great job on the book. It's a fantastic read.
All right, everybody. The real Mike Richter, U.S. Hall of Famer, and soon to be inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame. That's where you deserve, buddy.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, Mike Richter, everybody.
Thanks for having me on.